Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making a tier list from Holy Roman Empire's unit roster in Medieval 2 Total War in the vanilla game. And this tier list is based on campaign setting, so in addition to units' fighting capabilities, also the requirements and costs are taken into consideration. Furthermore, in the background of this tier list is my How Good Is series, where the units are tested and rated on the battle testing results as well as from the perspectives of requirements and costs, etc, etc. But without further ado, let's begin. First we have cavalry units and general's bodyguard. And, well, the unit is solid overall, as with all factions. It's rather easy to get, at least some of these, not so easy to get more than family members. So that's a bit of an issue. Then again, the unit's replenishment is rather nice in Medieval 2 Total War. You don't have to worry about that at all. And the unit does perform quite solidly, so most likely it will be carrying you in the early game at the very least. So based on that, I think I will give them S tier. Then we have feudal knights, and actually this is perhaps the most advanced heavy cavalry you will be needing in the campaign. Everything else above these, in my opinion, are pretty much bells and whistles. Nice to have, but not necessary. Because overall in battle, feudal knights tend to perform pretty much as well as the highest tier late game heavy cavalry units. And the requirements are so much easier for these guys, so that you probably will be using these throughout the campaign. Or perhaps you should, or perhaps if you like the slower paced campaign, perhaps then the later game units might be feasible, but at least in my playthroughs, these guys are carrying the campaign quite well. So, in my opinion, solid A tier for these guys. Replenishment is also rather easy for these. Then we have Gothic Knights. Perhaps they are the most good looking unit in the entire game. That armor over there is really cool. However, in my opinion, they are a bit of a trap unit. So the requirements are just absurd for this unit. King's Stables. So, okay, it's rather difficult to get these guys. And furthermore, when you get them and when they do suffer casualties in battle, it's a nightmare to try to replenish the unit or retrain it. So, even though it's rather nice in battle, and of course it's the coolest looking unit, as I already said, but because of those high requirements, or rather really high requirements, I think I will give it only B tier. So, even in late game, I would perhaps go for feudal knights over Gothic knights because the ease of replenishment or retraining for feudal knights compared to Gothic knights. Then we have Imperial knights. Yeah, these are actually rather nice units, even though their requirements are a bit higher than for feudal knights. The reason is that they do have armor-piercing secondary weapon. And against heavily armored opponents, that can actually mean the difference between victory and defeat. So basically against heavy cavalry and heavy infantry. And because of that, they do perform in battles rather solidly. Of course, the requirements and maintaining the unit might be a bit difficult, or rather retraining it. But still, I think I will give it solid A tier. Then we have mailed knights. I mean, kind of the basic heavy cavalry unit in the game, and actually if you recruit these in the early game, most likely they do have quite a bit of experience rather soon, and with that experience, perhaps with some upgrades, they actually do really well in the late game as well. So alongside with the feudal knights, I think these guys are kind of the carrying heavy cavalry duo for almost every European factions in the game. So solid A tier for mailed knights as well. Then we have merchant cavalry militia, kind of the northern European variant. In battle, in my opinion, these units are rather trash. they don't pack a punch. Well, they can take a bit of a beating, but not too much. What is one thing going for them is that they are militia, and thus they can get free upkeep, or number of units can get a free upkeep in settlements. And for cavalry that's quite nice. But still the fighting capabilities are so bad that I think I will give them only C tier. Then we have mounted crossbowmen. In my opinion, actually crossbowmen are perhaps the best unit category in this game. And the second is cavalry. And mounted crossbowmen kind of combines these two. So the missiles they fire pack really a punch, and at the same time they are able to outmaneuver almost every unit in the game, especially if you are playing against AI. So even though they are rather late, it's difficult to get them, but when you do get them, you should get them. You should really get them, because they just are outstanding units, and clearly among the highest ranking S tier units in at least the Holy Roman Empire roster. Then we have mounted sergeants, actually the only light cavalry unit for Holy Roman Empire. And this might actually be a bit controversial, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to give it S tier. And the reasoning is the unit is really easily available, it's easy to retrain, it's a bit faster than heavy cavalry, and with proper micro, it actually performs rather solidly in most situations. So actually, if you are playing against AI, in 4 versus 4 against feudal knights, with player control, I think armored sergeants can actually take the field from feudal knights, which is quite impressive, since they are actually in different weight class. So yeah, I think I will give them S tier, and rather solid S tier as well, because the requirements and prices, etc., are so low. Then we have rather unique Holy Roman Empire cavalry unit, riders, kind of a riding gunpowder unit. The range of the unit is really short, and if you use it as missile cavalry, as I used in my testing, the micro is just pain. On the other hand, if you want to use it a kind of heavy cavalry that fires and then charges, of course you are free to do so, but it practically means that the unit will suffer casualties. And of course with the Nightmare micro, it's, well, I'm not going to say likely, it's probable that the unit won't suffer casualties. But the requirements are rather high, and despite it being rather heavy-hitting missile cavalry, I will give it only A tier, mostly because of the painful microing the unit requires to actually survive in the battlefield. And the last cavalry unit for the Holy Roman Empire is Teutonic Knights, kind of equivalent to Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller, a solid cavalry unit, some special requirements to get it, but I think it's pretty much on par with Feudal Knights and Mage Knights, so rather solid A tier for that unit as well. Yep, let's put it behind Mage Knights because it's a bit more niche unit than these two. Then let's move to infantry units. First we have armored sergeants. Practically their main job is to hold the line or stop cavalry charges. The latter they can do rather well. The first they can do okays for some time period, but you cannot expect them to shine against pretty much anything else than against, say, light infantry, and one-on-one against light infantry or against cavalry. So because of that, they will only get B tier from me. Then we have dismounted feudal knights, and once again, as with feudal knights here, I think these guys are the kind of bread and butter of the heavy infantry in the game. So not so difficult to get, and they are rather solid performance. So yeah, if you need heavy infantry, you can rely on these guys, and pretty much you don't need anything fancier than these guys, because once again the fancier variants are quite often bells and whistles. Well, that's the difference between them. And then we have dismounted Imperial Knights, and actually I have to admit that I was a bit shocked how much worse the unit performed than dismounted Feudal Knights. Even though it has mace, but still, I don't know if this. I guess the stats are quite a bit worse, and also the requirements quite a bit higher, but I was rather disappointed on this unit. So in my books, don't go with these unless you have to. Do Feudal Knights instead. Perhaps, well, because the unit is rather feels obsolete, perhaps I should give it D tier, but I mean, yeah, nice enough in battle if you have them, but I think you should train dismounted Feudal Knights instead. Then we have Forlorn Hope, and the unit is absolutely trash. The unit is, it seems to be the worst unit in the entire game, so I guess D tier is rather obvious for it. The unit suffers from two things mainly, or rather three. The requirements are rather high, the unit size is rather small, and it uses two-handed weapons, which is bad thing in vanilla Medieval 2. So those three things combined make it rather the worst unit in the entire game. Don't go for that unit. It's horrible. And, well, speaking of D tier, we have Halberd Militia. They should be able to, or rather they are able to make Pike Wall, but their performance in Pike Wall is rather abysmal. Even if you put, say, 2 or 4 units on top of each other, still they do perform quite badly in Spear Wall. So, yeah, kind of Spear Wall unit that kind of doesn't do Spear Wall very well is a D tier unit for me. Not quite as bad as Forlorn Hope, but still rather trash unit. And we continue with trash units. We have Peasants. They will go over here. Yeah, really easy to access, but you don't pretty much do anything with them. Perhaps two exceptions. One is if you want to man castle walls so that the towers can fire, then you can use Peasants and perhaps maintaining public order in cities. Though, why should you go to Peasants if you could have militia units that can be free of upkeep? So yeah, absolutely horrible in battle, and well, yeah, you shouldn't get them. Get something better instead. But in some situations, perhaps you cannot get anything better, then by all means train these, but don't expect anything at all from them, except manning the towers on the walls. Then we have Pike Militia. Militia units are always nice because, well, they do. You can get the free upkeep for a number of units in cities. These guys can manage the Pike Wall rather nicely. So perhaps the best non-missile, or rather melee, militia unit in the game. So clearly A tier unit. In my books, they do perform quite solidly in battle. They can chew down light infantry, they can hold their own against cavalry and heavy infantry, at least for a while. So, kind of, even though the stats are not that great, and they are rather vulnerable to missiles, still I think they do hold the line quite well. Then we have Town Militia, kind of the easiest to access militia unit in the game. Perhaps mostly due to that they will get a C tier instead of D tier. In battle they are not that great, but perhaps on the walls if they can gain enough numerical superiority, or perhaps holding the line for a while for some cavalry units or missile units to actually do the real job there, they can do okay, but the stats are rather poor, and alone they cannot do that much. So because of that they will get only C tier, and I think I will value that merchant cavalry militia actually a bit higher than these guys. Then we have Zweihander, the highest tier melee infantry for Holy Roman Empire. And as for the Gothic Knights, I think this unit is a bit of a trap. So in battle it does rather okay-ish, but at the same time the requirements are rather high, and it has two-handed weapons, so it doesn't perform that well against, for example, enemies that have sword and shield. So yeah. And of course, because of the high requirements, the unit is rather hard to retrain, so B tier at most for me. I would rather go for dismounted feudal knights, because they are easier to replenish and they actually perform a bit better in battle. Once again, still a good looking or rather cool looking unit, but the usability is rather limited. Then we have sergeant spearmen. Yeah, I mean, they can hold the line, they can beat the cavalry at least, if the cavalry is not really determined. So perhaps if you use these guys to keep your missile units safe, then or hold the line for some other units to do flank or rear charge, they can do rather well, and at least they are better than town militia. So I mean, C tier, but they really don't have that much to write home about. And the same pretty much goes for spear militia, rather similar to those sergeant spearmen. They can get the free upkeep, which is nice, but the stats are a bit lower, so that kind of hampers the usability in the battlefield. But still, I mean, defending cities, decent enough militia unit. But once again, you cannot expect too much from either of these units. They have their own niche and not that much anything else. Then let's move to missile units. First we have arquebusiers. I mean, yeah, when these guys get to fire, they can do rather nice damage, and of course there is that fear factor associated with gunpowder units. At the same time, there are rather a late game unit, so that's a bit meaning it's a bit niche unit, and getting them to fire properly takes some microing, and you have to know what you are doing. So because of those facts, I think I will give it them only B tier. Then we have crossbow militia, and actually I think this is the unit will go actually straight to S tier. And well, this might be a bit controversial or surprising, but for a militia unit, the unit packs quite a bit of punch because crossbows are armor piercing. So if you can land proper shots on the enemy, it doesn't matter if it's light infantry or heavy cavalry or heavy infantry or whatever it is, those crossbows will just do damage. And it's relatively easy to get. It gets free upkeep, it's rather cheap. So yeah, you should be getting crossbow militias. Actually, they are the best militia unit in the Holy Roman Empire roster, in my opinion. So in most of the cases, you cannot go wrong if you are getting these guys. And for example, in defending cities, if the enemy charges with huge army towards the city center and you have only these guys, say 10, in line, probably these 10 units will inflict so much damage on the enemy army that they cannot take the city center. Perhaps you can put something in front of them, but perhaps that's not even necessary. They just do so much damage. Perhaps I'm a bit too much of a fan of crossbowmen, but still. Then we have handgunners. I mean, pretty much the same applies to them as to arquebusiers. Though the unit has shorter range, of course it's better armored, but I think it's not that great of a unit in my books. So the same weaknesses as with arquebusiers, but shorter range. And well, the only thing is that's better compared to, for example, crossbowmen or crossbow militia, is that it's highly armored, or rather more better armored, and there is that fear factor. But the range actually is shorter for these guys than for these, so it might be rather interesting to test which of these units would win one-on-one. Perhaps I need to do that test at some point. But yeah, let's continue. Next we have Pavis crossbowmen. I mean, they do perform quite well in battle. 8 tier. And why below crossbow militia? The reason is that the requirements are higher. So it's easy to get these guys, and they pretty much pack the same amount of punch than the Pavis crossbowmen. The Pavis crossbowmen have better defense, so that increases their survivability in the battle. But they do have the upkeep in any case, these guys, and the requirements are higher, so I think because of that they are a bit less valuable than the crossbow militia. Then we have peasant archers, kind of the basic archery units in the game. For most of the factions, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not that good either. So they can do damage if you can get them on the flank or behind the enemy. But from the front against heavier infantry, these will be struggling. And of course, the stats overall are not that great, and they don't have that armor piercing that crossbowmen have. So that's the reasoning for putting them in B tier only. And then we have peasant crossbowmen, pretty much the same unit as crossbow militia, with one exception, and that's the free upkeep that crossbow militia can get. So you will be paying the upkeep of these guys in all situations. And I think the free upkeep, or possibility for free upkeep, is rather nice for this unit. And of course you can train these from cities, you need castles for these, and as cities do produce more money, you might want to opt to have more cities at some point at the very least. Okay, then let's move to siege weapons. First we have ballista, and perhaps before rating these units overall, I have to admit that I don't like siege weapons that much. The reasoning is that they slow down the army speed in the campaign map, and in open field battles they usually don't do that well. Especially if the armies are kind of engaging relatively fast, then they just don't have enough time to fire enough of their ammo to kind of show their value, and then they are kind of a burden compared to if you had some heavy infantry or crossbowmen in their place. But yeah, let's continue with ballista. I would give them C tier. Not that great in knocking down city walls, and not that great in field battles as well. Of course, with some lucky shots you can snipe, for example, enemy general or enemy heavy cavalry or enemy heavy infantry, and then that can be great. But the rate of fire is not that great, and the area effect is not that great either. So that's the reasoning behind C tier. Then if you have basilisk, kind of the pinnacle of gunpowder siege weapons in the game, and I will give them B tier. And the reasoning is they can knock down enemy castle walls really nicely, and if the enemy does have cannon turrets or cannon towers, then you need something to outrange those to actually do something against the castle walls. So for that, basilisk is really great. It can fire explosive shots, though that increases its usability somewhat in open field battles, but still I don't consider it that great in the open field battles, and the requirements are really high, and the unit is really expensive to train and to maintain. So that's the reasoning, even though it has really huge utility in some niche situations, namely against enemy citadels, fortresses, cities with ballista and cannon towers. Otherwise, I see its usability rather limited. Then we have bombard, kind of the basic gunpowder siege unit, relatively easy to get in the mid-game, and it packs enough punch to knock down most castle walls. So perhaps you don't actually need anything more than these if the game has progressed so far that the enemy citadels, for example, do have those cannon towers. Well, actually, I'm not sure if those cannon towers can actually outrange these. So if that's the case, then you will be needing something else. So let's put these a bit farther back. Somewhere like there. But I think in most cases you can do just fine with bombards. Then we have cannons. I mean, yeah, kind of the Basilisk is the upgraded variant of cannons. The requirements are a bit lower for these guys, but the range and damage output are a bit weaker on the other hand. So, I mean, solid basic artillery piece for gunpowder weapons. And then we have catapult, perhaps my exception for siege weapons, and I will give them A tier. And the reasoning is that the catapult is actually able to do some rather nice damage, well, not nice, but average damage against settlement walls, so it's not completely useless in those situations. And furthermore, the firing arc of the flaming ammo is such that if there is densely packed enemy formation, these catapults can actually do tremendous damage. For example, if you are defending a settlement, or if in the open field the enemy is kind of tightly concentrated, then catapults can actually do quite nicely. So that's the reasoning for the exceptionally high ranking I'm giving catapults. Then we have Grand Bombard. I mean, not that big of an upgrade for Bombard, though the requirements are a bit higher. I think I will give them a C tier. I don't see that much value in Grand Bombards. Then we have Serpentine, actually pretty much only used to snipe enemy heavy infantry, generals, etc., etc. So it's not that useful against city walls or castle walls. And well, once again, in the open field, the battle is joined rather quickly, usually. So because of that, I will give it only B tier. Perhaps I'm a bit generous here. Perhaps I should give it C tier. Yeah, I think I will give it C tier. There. And then we have Trebuchet, kind of the pinnacle of siege weapons before gunpowder. And, well, yeah, it's rather nice at taking down castle walls, but in open field battles, I think it's quite a bit worse than catapults. And because of that, it only gets B tier over here. Of course, the range and the cow carcasses, etc., are nice, but overall, I think you can do just fine with catapults in the early game. Well, and of course, you can build that siege equipment, siege towers, battering rams, ladders, etc., so you don't probably need those siege weapons at all in some situations. But yeah, this is my view of Holy Roman Empire unit roster. Do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. You get access to some emojis, more to say what units to test next and what type of campaigns to play. And very special thanks to existing channel members, Napoleon Complex, Cossack Hussar, Mark Anthony. Your support is greatly treasured. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.